I know I'm not even in the picture yet, but I started class off with that so you can get the feeling of a steady beat. Da da dee da dee da 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 dee da da. That's what most of our music that we listen to on the radio has, a steady, constant beat. And I'm going to bring that up later in class, but first we're going to get started off. This is the 20th century, from 1900 to 1945. Like I said, I disagree with those actual dates, and that's just a personal preference. A lot of my friends agree the same, but so much hit, so many changes happened between these years that they decided it was almost like a turmoil transition from regular standard old classical music, and then just went kind of berserk. Around 1945, it kind of settled down again, but yet it's still going so many different avenues. But anyhow, let's get back. The tonal practices. Tonal means the blending of tones. They're more complex and diverse. They got really kind of strange. For instance, let me get my notes on the right page. That would help. And the reason this happened was, the development of cars, trains, airplanes, and people being able to communicate around the world. A lot of our cultures started blending. Remember, I told you we're studying Western art music. Well, that's from the Western Hemisphere. The Eastern Hemisphere are totally different sounds, different chord structures, and blending of sounds. But now, in this time period, we're traveling all over. We're blending, and so is the music, and so are the arts as a whole. And so now we're blending sounds from other countries with our music and styles and techniques of blending these sounds. There are tone clusters is the one that really stands out that I share with my intro classes. Here is music from the Western Hemisphere that we're used to. Chords and everything sound really nice and blend together. And then they started adding more and more notes that didn't fit really in the traditional style. Instead of, it may sound something, we're going to add and change notes. We're throwing in notes that don't fit in these standard chord structures. Now, tone clusters takes it even a step further. Tone clusters, we're putting notes that are right next to each other and using them purposefully. For instance, this is a C, and the right next to the C is a B. I'm going to play them together. And then we're going to add another note right next to that, and another note right next to that. And those are tone clusters. In fact, some composers went so far as to you just take your fist or your entire forearm and lay it on the piano, such as. Yes, this is considered music. This is music. We're going to listen to a piece of music by Charles Ives. The name of the piece is The Majority, and it's an example of tone clusters, which I just explained. You're playing notes right next to each other to blend those to blend contrasting sounds. Tone clusters, Ives, the majority, example of tone clusters. And I'm trying something new. I got something hooked up now. Let's just turn this a little bit. That doesn't work, so I'm just going to have to walk this right over. You can see up here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 notes all crammed together. And this is what creates the tone clusters. I'm going to play not the entire piece, but enough to where you'll get the idea and maybe help you out on the listening, because the listening for 20th century is going to be harder than what we've had before. Here's Charles Ives, the majority, using tone clusters. Good example of where you lay your whole forearm on the piano. Okay, that was Charles Ives, the majority. And now let's move on back over here to the chalkboard. Sorry about that glare, folks. I told you a couple videos back I was going to try and take care of that. I tried several things, but was unsuccessful. But I did review some of the videos, and I feel like you can still see. I try to write large enough for you to pick up. I'm going to check that screen setting again. Yeah. All right, now, another way of changing the tonality and stuff, a gentleman by the name of Claude Debussy, not Debussy, but Debussy, or Debussy, a lot of people say, but I've always heard it Debussy. He wrote a piece called Walls, V-O-I-L-E-S. And walls translated means sails. And when I hear sails, I think of these boats out in, out on a lake somewhere with these big billowing sails that kind of flow in the wind. But back in those days, they used to have what's called vaudeville acts, and it would be a show that had several entertainers come out on stage. And one act that was popular, where Debussy lived, was a lady would come out with a big old giant silk sheet, and you throw it up and flow it around. It just kind of wafts in the air, just kind of floating, never really making quick, sharp turns, whatever. It was just kind of all float with her dancing with this big old sail. Well, Debussy created his own scale, which we are going to, in about 2 weeks, get into a lot into scales. Now, scales determine which notes you play on a piece of music to make it sound the way you want it to sound. The scales that most of the music you listen to, I listen to too, are usually sound something like this. Now we can play any melody just using only those notes. But Debussy made up his own scale called the whole tone scale. That means there's a certain distance between each of the notes. Here is the whole tone scale Debussy came up with. Let me try that again. Make up a melody only using those notes, you really don't feel a distinct finish on this melody. See, you feel like it's not quite finished. Anyhow, so that was Claude Debussy, and he wrote a piece called Voiles, or Sails. And we're going to listen to that piece of music as an example of the whole tone scale. Now there's something else. When I first pulled this video up, I'm going to show you, and I'm going to show you why I played the Bobby McFerrin Don't Worry, Be Happy to begin the class. Moving on. Yeah, this works a lot easier than me trying to zoom in on the small computer screen. Let's get rid of that piece. Debussy, Waltz. And I get it started to a point. All right, this is a good point. Right here. Now, the Don't Worry, Be Happy that I played had distinct beat to it. You could feel the beat. Now, in order to really make this thing feel like it's flowing, Debussy, there's 4 beats, and actually here there's 2 beats in a measure, but every time you cross, these are called bar lines. Every time you pass a bar line, you feel a definite beat. But not Debussy. He took this line right here, crosses right over the bar line, which means take away the different beat. So you don't feel a beat. And the rhythm just kind of flows. And it flows over the bar lines where you would normally feel a beat. And I'm explaining that because this blends all the beats together so you don't feel any real distinction. And I'm going to show you a picture in a minute. Oh, you're going to need your book too, by the way. This is Debussy Waltz. Again, I'm not going to play the entire piece, but enough for you to get the idea. It would be next to impossible to dance to this piece because you don't feel the beat. I believe that's enough to give you an idea of all the real smooth flowing sensation. And that's what I played to begin with, Bobby McFerrin. Again, I will include not copies, but links to the YouTube channels to where you can listen to these pieces. I do want to end with taking away the feeling of the beat and the feeling of a stopping point in the melodies and stuff. That's an example of Impressionism. If you turn in your book to page 373, you will see at the top a picture by Claude Monet, and he uses pastel, really soft colors, and kind of blends them in. There's no real distinction where one color stops and one begins. It just kind of motes and evolves into another color. And the effect this gives is almost a mystified thing. And in the music, that's what Debussy and Ives, not Ives, but Debussy was doing with his whole tone scale, and his blending of the rhythms was kind of making a misty sound, misty effect. In contrast, if you turn to page 393, remember I said that Impressionism was to kind of blend and make things real soft. On 393, you have the picture called Scream. And notice how those colors are very distinct and sharp edges between them. And it's really, the guy, he don't look happy. It's not a happy, feely, fluffy bunny picture. And that's called Expressionism. Now, Expressionism was almost a rebellion against all these composers and artists who wanted everything to be light and flowing, and all of a sudden we bring in the dark. Expressionism always had a dark feel to it. And there were music pieces, Schoenberg, if you look on page 393, right at the bottom is Arnold Schoenberg talking about him. But Expressionism was the dark side of music, basically, in contrast to Impressionism. And I am going to go ahead, let's see how much I have on 20th century. Yeah, I'm going to move on, I do believe. All right, talked about Expressionism, we shared the pictures. And no, I don't think so. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and stop here, and then the next class period will be the end of the 20th century. It's also going to be a shorter video. And the idea of, I had to argue with myself. I could just keep on talking and talk and play the entire pieces, but you have the links to YouTube to watch these pieces. And if you put in the time like you are supposed to and click on those links and listen to the entire piece of music, that will add quite a bit of time to your class time. Don't forget, your attendance is taken by turning your assignment in on the following class day. With that said and done, class dismissed.